Miss Sherri Adams, thank you so much for joining me today. We go back many, many years now.
Yeah.
Time flies when we're having fun. And you had a front row seat to a lot of my experience with workplace abuse. As you know, a colleague, as a friend, as an expert, and workers' comp claims, and so it's really interesting for me to be able to kind of circle back and talk to you when you were there at, I guess, my origin story of why I've decided I care about this so much. And I think, you've also had some personal experience here. And I think, as a human being that this can be really painful stuff for folks. And I know for me, once I went through it once, I didn't want anyone else to ever go through it. And so I kind of started a journey in HR land to try and help fix things, while you have gone on to be the 2024 PRIMA Risk Manager of the Year, and you're now a Chief Risk Manager, or sorry, is it Chief Risk Officer or Chief Risk Manager? It's
It's Chief Risk Manager is the
okay.
official title. Yeah.
Yes, I want to stick to your fancy title. I don't want to mess that up. So the city of Kansas City, Missouri.
Mhm.
And so but you just have like so much like both lived experience and then deep professional expertise in workers' comp. And I don't think a lot of regular employees out there understand that there could be a workers' comp element to a toxic work environment, and that risk managers actually have a big role to play in terms of helping organizations kind of clean up a little bit. And
Mhm.
so I'd love to talk to you about, how risk departments can help employees and how they can help companies. But maybe let's just start with the people first. So how is it different than HR? Like how do toxic workplaces show up for you in the risk world?
So in the risk world, because generally risk handles your family medical leave, your ADA claims, workers' comp claims, we're seeing some pieces of employment liability claims. So we've kind of touched all the places where it lands, except for the HR complaints, workplace violence, that type of thing. So we really can see, the things that come across for us are, hostile work environment. You'll see I have PTSD issues working for the supervisor. This is the medical certification piece. Workers' comp, there's investigations generally that can end up in EEO. So I think we're a lot of times places where people who don't know where to go, this is where they come. And we try and treat them with respect, civility, and try and make sure that we're pointing them in the right direction and giving them that little push that they need to kind of go in that right direction.
Yes, and I've seen firsthand what great care you have for people. So your organization is definitely lucky to have you. What are some good general advice that you wish more folks kind of knew out there about workers' comp claims and how they work and how to ask for one? What to do if no one offers you one?
Yeah. So it all starts with the phone call to the nurse line. They have some different rules, different places where I've worked. Sometimes the supervisor has to be on the call, sometimes they don't. But I always tell people that if you're not comfortable with your supervisor on that call, call us here in the department. We also have a safety hotline that they can call and reach out to us either anonymously or say I need some help, please contact me with some of their like a personal phone number. um, but I think it's training, and so much of it is we bump up against, why do we train employees how to file claims? Well, we train employees to file claims so that they know they have recourse for things that happen in the workplace. They need to know. Same with filing an FML. Same with filing an ADA request. People need to know how to do that because they need it. They need something. They need it. So we've really tried to change a culture.
That's really incredible. And I know you and I have talked before that there's kind of changes coming across the United States. And it, of course, it varies jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but some states, for example, like New York, you can say, I've been bullied on a job. This is documented by a doctor, and you can get compensation for that.
Yeah.
And then, we see in other places where maybe it's only for first responders or others. What is your understanding about some of these trends? Do you think that that will continue? Has COVID impacted that? What are you seeing there?
I think yes, all of the above.
Yeah.
It's been impacted by many things. I think with some of the culture changes that we've seen over time, COVID. We have a lot more folks, if they feel threatened in the office, they're going to ask for remote work. And so really, I think what we've done is kind of drill down into those. So, okay, you want remote work, but why? But why? But why? And then we find out that there's a problem. And then because my office doesn't handle some of those investigations and those pieces, it kind of goes into a different realm. But where I'm at currently, we see a lot of litigation on whistleblowers, discrimination. You've treated me badly, hostile work environment, and we're just getting hammered. So that culture has to change, and it has to change from the top down. And I don't think we have top down support in a lot of areas at this point, but we're trying. I will say, just as a caveat, that we, for the first time on our supervisors training learning module, there is a psychological safety
Yeah.
training that they have to do. It's only like 15 minutes, but it hits on a lot of the civility and listening, and treat people with respect, listen to what they have to say, admit your mistakes.
Beautiful.
So,
That's
but
progress.
something
Yeah.
is progress. And I was actually pleasantly surprised when I went in there to go take my overdue uh, training.
We won't tell anyone. Okay, so that's yeah. So that is really, really helpful. And before we kind of move over to what you're talking about, because I do love that you're going there too, in terms of why organizations really need to care about this. Besides just hey, don't help people file claims against us. And
Yeah.
so, for the folks out there that may not have a hotline, or maybe they're scared to go to HR, or maybe they work in like a small organization, what would your advice be to them if they feel like that they've got, if they're hurting and they feel like it's coming from the workplace?
Mhm.
Should they just ask for that form? How can they engage with a small HR shop, or if they have a risk team, how can they ask for help there?
Always reach out to the risk team. I would say, if you're not, and find your champion. Most folks have somebody in the office or somebody throughout the organization that they're either friends with, that they trust. Um, Most folks have that. And I think that's important, is find that champion. In our office, where most of us are pretty well liked, and we will get phone calls from just about anybody. So,
That is a good sign. That means that they trust you. And so that is really, really wonderful. And so we know that in some cases, in some jurisdictions, if your doctor is saying, hey, this is tied to the work site, if you have therapy records or things like that, that can show that you have a claim, you may be able to get some sort of compensation from that. But say you're in a jurisdiction where they don't have those rules in place or those laws in place, is it still worthwhile to ask for that form to,
absolutely, because that's how we change the law. It
yeah.
is by having those examples, saying, it's damaging to have folks who feel that way in the workspace. People don't want to come to work. Absenteeism goes up, productivity goes down. And we're really seeing and be able to capture more of that now as we kind of move through, because even with FML, we're trying to capture on, they're saying that it's a mental health issue. They can't work for that supervisor. Um, and we're starting to do more investigations on the workers' comp side. We've actually hired outside investigators to go and take recorded statements, so that it's not the claims examiner, it's not the safety guys calling. It's actually an outside investigation firm who's recording the statement, transcribing, and it becomes part of the record.
Outstanding. Do people feel safer with the outside person than the inside person? Is
Absolutely.
good. Okay.
Absolutely. It's much more neutral, and I think they feel like it's more protected.
That's
Um,
good.
he's
Yeah,
getting,
that's
yeah.
really important. Yeah, I get phone calls all the time from folks, and just breaking, absolutely breaking. And one of the first things I like to check in on folks is like, how much leave have you banked up? Have you been there for a year? Do you qualify for FMLA? Like pull that emergency lever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're, because sometimes what you'll see is people who are so distressed that they'll just go ahead and quit. And
Mhm.
sometimes even just a few weeks of a breather can really make all the difference in the world. But yes, it is really important for companies to be paying attention to that, because so many times they're not looking at, things like there's a real cost that comes when somebody takes long-term leave because of workplace abuse. And
Yeah.
so, you and I have spoken frequently too about the role risk can play. Sometimes HR not respected, or it's the feelings people, or, that they're like, go throw birthday parties, go do these other things. But risk is typically viewed as having a little bit more structure, more process, more science, all these
Yeah.
other things that are associated with that. How is it that you think risk might be able to help organizations move towards psychological safety in a way, in a language that they understand?
Well, I think by calling it psychological safety, I think it becomes part of our safety program.
I
And I
like that.
think that's kind of the way that we're going and talking more about, um, some people get a little uptight about the word, the psychological safety piece.
Yeah.
I think it's culture. I think it's respect, and kind of like we heard that gentleman speak on civility. Let's call it something a little bit different. Maybe it's a little easier to swallow for some people, but we all know what it is. And
Yeah.
so making it part of that safety program, I think that brings it into the culture piece. And it
Um,
allows us to go out and train. It allows us to address that piece. We work with a lot of public works folks. I have fire. So we see it everywhere. Um, and so if we can make it just part of that daily culture, I think is that's where it needs to be pushed to, is safety.
No, and I love that. And, particularly for like cities and counties where you have a lot of experience, because they do have, public works departments, they have, fire, a lot of times police departments, and it's not discussed enough how traumatic these environments could be, not just for like, things that a police officer may experience in the course
Yeah.
of work, or a fireman, or even a social worker and others. But also, we're seeing in a lot of these male dominated fields some of the worst statistics. And
Mhm.
so, one of the groups I'm affiliated with, the Workplace Suicide Prevention Committee, talks about construction, mining, any of these fields
Mhm.
where it's not like a culture of, hey, you said something that really hurt my feelings, or teasing that goes too far, hazing, things like that. And the consequences are horrifying: higher suicide rates, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, people essentially trying to self-medicate their way through because they can't simply talk about that. Are you seeing that too? Are you seeing special interventions there?
So I think more what we see is the accidents out in the field,
Mm,
the excavations, because somebody is afraid to tell the supervisor, I'm not going in that hole because it's not shored up.
right.
Those are the type of things that I think that, we all get the PTSD and the mental health claims from our first responders, that they live in a whole different category
Yeah.
most of the time. They, granted,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that go on there also. But I think for our public works folks, parks, all that, the manual labor and equipment, um, maintenance and equipment operators, I think that's where we see a lot of our pieces where people just don't speak up, and people lose hands, people lose their lives, it's just, there's tons of stories out there about
Yeah.
how somebody wasn't comfortable enough to tell their supervisor because their supervisor was a jerk and was just going to say, well, we need to get it done. And that's a top down problem. And,
Yeah.
I've seen it multiple times here.
Yeah. I know, you and I have also spoken about, sometimes it can be really hard to get top down buy-in.
Yeah.
Obviously, like it's like an epidemic, across organizations where there's a lot of mantras and mission statements and all these other things that are out there. But when push comes to shove, there's a real avoidance when it comes to toxic workplaces. And so one of the things I try to work on is quantifying that. Like, what is that specific dollar amount? But are you seeing that with, say, like insurance, the ability to get insurance or premiums claims? Are leaders in your world paying attention to some of that stuff? Is that
They're starting
resonating?
to. They're starting to,
Yes.
because with the workers' comp claims, we can kind of show how it affects that because actuarially we can look at those claims and how they affect, our it's called our experience modification factor.
Mhm.
Um, it should be right around 1. Ours is not. So we won't say what it is, but ours is not. And a lot of that is centered around fire. But
Right.
but still, yeah, actuarially funding, we're self-insured to $2 million and carry an
Mm.
excess policy that is quite large. We have to carry a bond with the state, which continues to grow based on not just claims for physical injuries, but physical injuries that may have been related to some sort of a psychological safety program problem.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so we're really trying to delve deeper into that and see where that is. And like I said, we come from I'm in a very litigious city county now. Uh,
Mm.
and our EPL claims are through the roof. And we're spending a lot of money there that could be used for other things. We're coming up on a budget year that we're looking at budget cuts and hiring freezes. And so if we can eliminate some of these, we could probably save jobs when it comes
Absolutely.
to.
And I think that that's a dirty, open secret that we all know in the public sector.
Mhm.
LA Times talked about that. I think last year they spent $1 billion in lawsuits in LA. And
Mhm.
so you think about how many services, that's taxpayer money.
Yeah,
Like how many services could have been done? Could you have cleaned up the homeless problem? Like, could you
yeah,
have helped with housing affordability, taking care of schools, hospitals,
yeah,
roads, all these things that we want our tax dollars to go to are
yeah.
not going to that because of that. And so we know that internally, but it'll be interesting to see if more and more of that information makes its way out to the public, if that can also help apply pressure internally for some of these things too.
And I think through that investigation process, we're going to be able to identify that more. Right now, it's just, yeah, I slipped and fell, and now I'm going to stay home for a year.
Yeah.
So, but the slip and fall wasn't really the root cause of what happened. There was something
Right.
else going on, and this is how I'm not going to come back to work.
Right. I just want to avoid work at all cost.
Mhm.
And
I still
I
get a
threw
check,
myself down a flight of stairs, which
and
I've considered. Yeah.
I actually had a claim where that happened. Yeah,
Oh
it was
man.
very
Yeah.
sad.
Oh
Early
yeah.
on in my career, but and not knowing what I know now, um,
Hmm.
you could really dig a little
See
deeper.
why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think
Um,
that's what's important with the investigations, especially on the workers' comp side, is is really going back to what is the root cause of the injury that happened.
right. No, absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
Sherri, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wealth of information here. Are you okay if I share information below? So if folks have questions or want to get a hold of you or other folks at Prima and learn more about the good work you're doing, is that okay to share?
Absolutely. Yes, it's absolutely okay to share.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.